Welcome back to a new recap. We'll watch together, In Time, a thrilling adventure. In 2169, individuals will have undergone genetic engineering to halt aging at the age of 25. After that, they have 1 year left, and a timer appears on their arm. Since time is now society's currency, they must labor in order to continue living. Thus, wealthy individuals are essentially immortal. Time zones have been established around the nation to distinguish between the various social levels. New Greenwich is the richest zone. Will and his mother Rachel reside in a small apartment in the ghetto, and they struggle to make ends meet every day. Will wants to utilize time fighting as a side gig to earn some cash, but Rachel says no because it's never a good idea. Despite this, Will continues to be a kind person and offers little Maya part of his time whenever he sees her on the streets so she can live. Will works in the local factory with his best friend Burrell, where they frequently uncover deceased people who have timed out on the floor and where snack costs are always rising. All of them receive daily pay, but the factory always finds a way to reduce the wages of its workers by blaming them for not meeting their quota. Will visits the bar where he used to gamble one evening in order to collect an hour that he owed a man. He also encounters Burrell, who is contentedly becoming hammered because of a weird man who is purchasing drinks for everyone. Henry is the person whose timer has a full century left on it. Will tries to tell Henry about the Minutemen, a gang of robbers who steal other people's time, but Henry doesn't listen since he doesn't understand what a rich man is doing here. Will is terrified when Fortis, the gang boss, appears and challenges Henry to a time fight. Will remains in the bar, hiding at the back just in case, while everyone else flees. Henry agrees to the task, but not before requesting a quick break in the restroom. Will seizes the opportunity to take out the mobster and make his getaway with Henry via the back door because he is going with just one guard. After sprinting several blocks, they seek refuge within an abandoned factory, which will secure us from the inside to ensure their safety during the night. Will questions why a wealthy man would be in the slum, and Henry replies that he left New Riverside because, at 105, he was sick of living. Will calls this out on its stupidity, and Henry finds the boy's ignorance of reality amusing. He says that because the rich can only survive if the poor perish, the cost of living in the ghetto keeps going up to ensure that people keep dying. After a while, Will and Henry nod out, and Henry uses the fact that he was the first to wake up to spend all of his time with Will, only 5 minutes to himself, in the morning. Shortly afterward, Will discovers a "Don't waste my time" note written on the window. Just before he times out, he notices Henry sitting on the bridge when he looks outside. Will walks to the bridge to make sure Henry is dead before fleeing, not realizing there are surveillance cameras nearby. Henry visits Burrell's home a short while later and runs into Greta, Burrell's wife, and their newborn. In a private conversation, Henry gives Burrell a decade as a gift, matching the 10 years they had been together. Henry walks to the bus station in the evening to wait for his mother, but she never shows up. Rachel finds out she only has an hour and a half left, and she is now unable to pay for it because the bus fare increased in the afternoon. Rachel has to rush to see her kid again because it's a 2-hour walk home, and Will also starts running as he knows what's happening. Rachel passes out in Will's arms after the mother and son crash into one another in the middle of the road, but it's too late. Henry's body is discovered in the river by the Timekeeper's police squad early the next morning. Agent Leon gives his guys the command to examine the security footage since he is certain that he has been murdered for his time. Though they couldn't see the body falling due to the camera's angle, they can see Will's face and believe he is responsible for Henry's murder. Will, meanwhile, desires revenge for the passing of his mother. Pretending to be a wealthy man who got lost, he takes a limo and orders the driver to take him to New Greenwich, where he must pay a hefty toll each time he passes an international border. After arriving in the city, Johnny checks into a classy hotel where socialite Sylvia notices him. Will eats some lunch after resting, with Sylvia observing him from a distance. The waitress notices that Will isn't from around here, but she still treats him well because he tips her well. She also notes that Will needs better attire if he plans to visit the casino. The timekeepers are able to determine Will's current position since the system finds it unusual that he traveled through so many time zones in a short period of time. Leon also acknowledges that he had previously pursued Will's father. Will purchases a suit in the evening and visits the casino, where he is requested to make a voluntary donation of 1 year as he is not a member. When Will enters the poker table, he meets Mr. Weiss, a time-loaning tycoon who isn't afraid to place large bets. Weiss's daughter Sylvia joins the table as well, but she merely stays to observe, and Will watches her closely while he takes a chance and bets everything he has. It ends up being worthwhile when Will impresses Weiss by winning the game and receives an invitation to his upcoming party. Will purchases an expensive car the following day and drives it to Weiss's celebration. Sylvia tells Will that she can tell he's probably from the ghetto and extends an invitation to dance. Sylvia is quite inquisitive about Will. She acknowledges that there are moments when she envies others who don't live in the ghetto since she is constantly under her father's watchful eye and doesn't really have any independence. She wishes she could do something worthless or silly. It should be considered unwise that Will brings her to the beach behind the home to go skinny dipping. At first hesitant, Sylvia eventually jumps into the water with him and they talk about the prospect of doing more stupid things. Sylvia hides with Will in a cave as people start seeking for her, asking him to leave before they get into trouble. To avoid suspicion, the two use different entrances to return to the estate. Weiss extends an invitation to Will to play poker, but the timekeepers, who tracked Will's whereabouts by tracing the sale of his automobile, abruptly end their game. After bringing Will to a private office for questioning, they don't believe him when he claims that Henry intentionally times out. As a result, they take up most of Will's time, leaving him with just 2 hours for booking and processing. Leo informs Will that, although Will doesn't remember him well, he reminds him a lot of his father. When Weiss and Sylvia arrive to see how things are going, Will uses the commotion as cover to assault the timekeepers, seize a rifle, and flee. After taking Sylvia hostage with the revolver, they flee through the back door and get into Will's car. Will reacts by driving backwards when Leon starts chasing him throughout the city and even hits his car from behind. Will is able to escape when he narrowly avoids a truck, but Leon doesn't react quickly enough and crashes into it. Will begs Sylvia to help him for a while as they travel to the slums, but she declines. The automobile crashes when they get to the bridge because Will is preoccupied with the surveillance cameras and fails to notice the spike strip on the ground. After Sylvia and Will pass out, Fortis and his men discover them a little while later and start robbing Sylvia of her time. The thugs flee at that point as the timekeeper's sirens can be heard coming, giving Sylvia only 30 minutes. Upon awakening, Sylvia becomes anxious about the limited time she has left and seeks Will's assistance. Will thinks it funny that she's now pro-sharing, but he still helps her before driving her into town. The timekeepers come to check the automobile after they leave, but Leon has to ask for his daily salary first because he never keeps more time than is required. Leon, certain that Will get in touch with them first, decides to give up on pursuing him after realizing the circumstances. When Will visits Burrell to beg for assistance, Greta informs him that Burrell drank so much that he passed away with 9 years still on his timer. Sylvia begins to freak out once more, but Will pulls her to the pawn store after noticing that she is wearing beautiful earrings. When the owner realizes how expensive the rings are, he decides to make an exception even though he is about to close. They had little choice but to take his 2-day payment after he sees how short of time they are in order to survive. They then proceed to a payphone, where Will forces Sylvia to call her home's number so he may speak with Leon. Will demands that the timelines in the ghetto get 1,000 years as a ransom. Leon informs Will that he is starting to resemble his father too much and that, contrary to what Will believes, the man's death was not caused by a time fight but rather by something more sinister. Will hangs up on him, and Leon informs Sylvia's parents about the ransom. Nevertheless, Weiss is hesitant to part with even what amounts to pennies for him. Sylvia gets dressed in Rachel's old clothing and heads to Will's apartment to stay the night. When Sylvia questions Will about his father, he replies that his father was a skilled time fighter who had taught him a few tactics. He takes Sylvia's arm and demonstrates the time fighting technique, a struggle of wills between timers, for the purpose of proving his argument. His father trained him to give the impression that the other player has the upper hand, to allow his own clock nearly run out, and then turn the tables and win everything when the other player is preoccupied with his impending death. Will now understands that his father was most likely killed because he handed away what he won, contrary to his previous belief that he perished in a time fight. Then Will and Sylvia talked about what occurred on their 25th birthdays. Will's timer went off while he was living on the streets, and because of their debt, he nearly lost his extra year. On the other hand, Sylvia awoke peacefully in bed, and her father granted her 10 years to celebrate. Will observes the timeline building from the window the following morning, but sadly, Weiss didn't pay the ransom, so they have no charity to give. Sylvia is saddened by her father's disregard for others, but she eventually realizes that he acquired wealth by violating the rights of others. Sylvia is told to go home by Will, but she rejects, so they decide to cooperate and have a kiss. Will gives Sylvia the revolver to defend herself while he watches from the corner since Sylvia does want to call home. Weiss answers Sylvia's call right away and tells her that the timekeepers are on their way, despite her insults. Sylvia fires a shot at Leon's arm after turning around and observing him approaching. After noticing that timekeepers don't keep much time on hand to deter thieves, Will seizes the opportunity to check Leon's timer and decides to allow him some leeway so that his colleagues can come to his aid. Everyone yells at Leon for not protecting the tiny people as he starts to walk out of town as Will and Sylvia flee in his car. Fortunately, he is saved before things turn violent by another keeper. Will gets an idea when Sylvia mentions later on that they can't keep driving in a police car. He poses as a timekeeper to pull over another car on the street. After that, they take the rich woman's time and earrings, giving her 1 day to go away in her car. They realize they're now wanted individuals when they stop the car to watch the news after they've driven far enough out of town. Sylvia is told to return by Will once more, but she declines because she finds this to be far more satisfying. Weiss is deceiving his investors in the meantime by pretending that everything is under control. When Leon arrives, he tells him that Sylvia is now being pursued like a criminal and that this is no longer a kidnapping. Weiss tries to buy Leon around to his way of thinking, but Leon refuses and tells him that he will be caught as an accomplice if he tells the keepers that Sylvia contacts him. Will is later asked by Sylvia if he would really give up time if he had it. Will replies that he would, and she devises a scheme. After breaking into a Weiss money truck, the two proceed to steal as many time capsules as they can by smashing the vehicle into a time bank. The residents of the ghetto are free to seize the remaining capsules. Nothing remains by the time the timekeepers show up. Among her clothes in the evening, Greta discovers a time capsule that will left as an act of forgiveness. Will also pays Maya a visit while she is sleeping on the streets, and he gives her some additional time. They take the remaining time they stole to the timeline, where the clerk distributes it to others in need. Leon observes time that shouldn't be there in the timekeeper's office and believes Will is harming the very people he is attempting to assist. When Fortis tries to rob a man the following morning, the victim is finally able to defend himself since he purchased a rifle. Fortis gives the impression of letting him go, but as soon as the man turns around, he shoots him. Fortis notices the man has spent a lot of time when he looks at his timer. Will and Sylvia start robbing time banks everywhere they go, and the news reports on their exploits. Weiss questions whether his daughter was attempting to harm him, but his wife reminds him that Weiss nearly killed her by suffocating her in the first place. After searching for Will's flat for a week, Leon and his men prepare to take them into custody. But as soon as Will hears radio conversation through the window, he and Sylvia flee. They storm into another apartment and jump out a window at the back of the building, landing safely atop a car. Will is unharmed. When Will and Sylvia lead the chase to the rooftops, Leon unleashes a barrage of gunfire on them. Leon proceeds to follow them and pursues them across the town. Will tries to shoot back but is unsuccessful, so he and Sylvia leave the rooftops and board the bus. The driver muses over turning them over to the police, but Will bribes him into keeping quiet, allowing them to leave Leon behind. A few hours later, Will and Sylvia pay an additional fee to have all the rooms at the hotel and to have the receptionist keep their identity a secret. The hotel is fully occupied when a new client walks in, but he still manages to catch a glimpse of Will and Sylvia heading upstairs. Subsequently, Fortis and his men start threatening strangers in exchange for information regarding Will and Sylvia. People first remain mute in order to save their savers, but Fortis later murders a man to demonstrate his seriousness. The man from the hotel is motivated to admit what he witnessed by this. Will and Sylvia find out at the hotel that their heads are being sought for 10 years, which they find somewhat offensive. Fortis abruptly storms into the room with his soldiers, holding the couple at gunpoint and explaining that the timekeepers have left him alone since he steals from his own people and that it is now his responsibility to bring order back. He dares Will to a time battle, saying he dislikes killing people in cold blood. When Henry starts to glance at his timer, Will starts using the tactic his father taught him and starts using all of Henry's time. As the shocked guards approach to observe, Will seizes the opportunity to shoot each one of them before he permanently ends Fortis' time. Will and Sylvia had left by the time the timekeepers arrive at the hotel. A few hours later, Will discovers that lending rates and prices are increasing more quickly to compensate for the extra time spent on the streets. Their small thefts aren't having any effect. It will take them 1,000,000 years to break even. Thankfully, Sylvia is aware of where to locate this quantity. The following day, Weiss arrives at work with an unusually large entourage of bodyguards because he is concerned about the circumstances. When the guards sense a threat, they abruptly whirl around, but it's merely Sylvia declaring her intention to give up. Will is able to sneak up on Weiss and take him hostage since Weiss believes her and is prepared to give her back. After that, Will and Sylvia drag Weiss to his office so they may force him to open the safe containing the 1,000,000-year capsule. Will makes it clear that's exactly what he intends to happen when Weiss points out that giving 1,000,000 people a year simply makes their suffering worse and that flooding the wrong zone with 1,000,000 years might break the system. Weiss is locked in his own office, from which Will and Sylvia escape. The timekeepers pursue the robbers as soon as they hear about it, closing the bridge to prevent them from going back to the ghetto. Leon is after them as well, and when he locates them, he becomes preoccupied with them to the point where he neglects to receive his daily salary. Will drives past the time zone barrier and ignores the gunfire from the keepers, allowing him to enter the ghetto even though they are firing at them. Leon does not lose time in crashing his automobile into theirs. Will exits the car right away, hands Maya the 1,000,000-year capsule, and then he and Sylvia act as though they are giving up. When the timeline declares that there is time for everyone, a jubilant crowd fills the street, obstructing Leon's path and enabling Sylvia and Will to flee. An envious Leon believes he has won. When the robbers get past another barrier, Leon had to chase after them on foot. Before he can get back in his car, he shoves people aside. When he finally gets up with them, Will surmises that Leon was once also from the ghetto. Leon tries to arrest them after confirming this and clarifying that he worked hard to get out, which is how things should be. Will emphasizes that there's no sense as he and Sylvia are running out of time and will likely pass away soon anyhow. Leon checks his own timer after realizing that he hasn't got much time left since he hasn't received his salary. At that moment, Leon's clock runs out and he passes away on the road. With their last few moments together, Will and Sylvia share a kiss as they part ways. Will, however, rushes to Leon's car to grab some for himself after realizing the keepers have time in their cars. Since Sylvia can't run as fast as him, she worries that she won't make it. However, Will races back to meet her, and they are able to pass the time together before death claims them. When he returns to the company, Weiss has given up and informs his staff that the situation is over. Across the country, newscasts display the people who have taken to the streets. People are traveling across the zones to get to New Greenwich while the industries are idle. Although the authorities insist that everything is under control, everyone is aware that the system is about to break. The staff at Timekeepers decides to leave the office since they are at a loss on what to do. Unabated, Will and Sylvia begin pursuing larger banks in an effort to prevent the return of the previous system. Subscribe for more movies.